Time for our debate this hour. Sir Cliff Richard is calling on MPs to grant anonymity for sexual offences suspects before they are charged. During a meeting at the House of Lords, the singer explained, quote, how desperate it is to be accused of something you never did. Police raided his home in 2014 as part of an investigation into a sex assault claim. He was never arrested. He told the meeting how the media coverage of the allegations had, quote, nearly destroyed him and that he would never fully get over it. So we're asking, should people accused of such crimes be given anonymity? We're joined by barrister and author of Justice on Trial, Daw QC, and Senior Associate in the Abuse Team at Hugh James Solicitor, Kathleen Hallisey. Welcome to you both, and we appreciate your time. I wonder, Daw, if we can start with you. That old adage about there being no smoke without fire, that is the problem here. When there is a great fanfare of publicity, even if the case goes nowhere, the stink hangs around.
It does, and of course, I suppose the problem, if you put it in those terms, is that that's the case for everybody who's accused of any crime. So whilst we're specifically talking about sex offences, which have a unique form of uncomfortableness, for those who hear about them and read about them in the media, the truth is that if you're accused of fraud or you're accused of an act of violence and you're identified in the media, from that moment forward, your life effectively has been destroyed.
I just wonder, Kathleen Hallisey, how true that is really, because is that not a category error? It's one thing to be accused of fraud and subsequently, beat the rap. But if it's a sex crime, I mean, we all can think of the examples, can't we? The paediatrician in South Wales who was beaten up because the locals thought they were a paedophile, got confused. It has a particular iniquity attached to it, sex crimes.
It certainly does, and certainly those people have my sympathies. But as a solicitor who acts on behalf of victims of sexual abuse and survivors, I think that the numbers are far greater of survivors and victims who don't come forward. And so hence why I think it's important that there is reporting around suspects' names when they're charged.
Daw, we think back to the Jimmy Savile inquiry. We think back to the number of people who came forward. Some of them were, if I can put it in these terms, legitimate victims. A great many of them actually were not. But the point is, had his name been kept secret, nobody would have come forward. Sometimes you have to make public somebody's potential wrongdoing to encourage witness and victims to come forward.
Yes, well, I'm not going to comment on the points you made about the Jimmy Savile case. I don't know the detail of that. But I do agree with you that there are cases, particularly in the sexual sphere, particularly when you're talking about recidivist offenders who may have committed multiple offences, where if you don't publicise the name, many victims who have chosen, and been too frightened and all of the other factors that we've heard about, too frightened to come forward, wouldn't come forward. But if they do hear the publicity around the person who abused them, they may well come forward. And that's happened in a number of these cases. The US gymnastics scandal involving widespread sexual abuse and a whole range of other cases. So it's a very, very difficult line to tread between complete anonymity and complete open house. And I think, broadly speaking, at the moment, we probably get it about right.
There does seem, Kathleen Hallisey, to be a campaign that's in motion. I've mentioned Cliff Richard there in my introduction. People who feel they've been wrongly accused and almost a degree of complicity in the way we in the media cover the story as well. What can we do to get coverage of these stories right?
Well, I think it's important that, it's clearly reported and that you're just saying that a person has been questioned and clear that they haven't been charged. I think that would go some way to assuaging some of the fears that people have around this. But I think when you look at, even in the case of Sir Cliff Richard and some of the other high-profile people that were arrested in connection with Operation Yewtree, a lot of those people ended up being charged and convicted, and that there were additional charges that were brought after their names were published, which really does support the argument that publishing these people's names does enable victims and survivors to feel that they're not alone, they're not the only person.
Kathleen, what about was it Operation Midland and people like Field Marshal Lord Bramall and Leon Britton? I forget which of them had a wife who had senile dementia, and the husband died before they'd been exonerated, and the effect was that she went to the grave thinking that those allegations against her former spouse, her late spouse, were legitimate. I mean, I know there were particular circumstances around that investigation, but, you know, those were cases which had such oxygen of publicity, not just from the media. People were endlessly re-quoting on things like Twitter. But my point is, once the name's out there, you can't put it back in the box.
You absolutely can, but I think you have to also look at it from a safeguarding and public interest point of view, which is that potentially there's a person out there in the public who is dangerous to all of us, is dangerous to children. And it's important that we're, as the public, able to protect ourselves as well. Those are very sad cases. They absolutely have my sympathy, but I think that they really are the outlier, and I don't think they're the majority of cases.
OK. Chris Daw, in conclusion, it seems what Kathleen Halliday is saying is that is a price worth paying. If we have a situation like the one we've just described, that just has to be.
I think, frankly, having acted for clients who have faced these issues, for example, being placed in the public domain, accused of extraordinarily serious and extraordinarily damaging allegations such as rape or domestic violence or other things, and have subsequently gone on to be cleared, the truth of it is that the legal process may have cleared them, but society hasn't. And it's really the end of someone's life when they're identified for something they didn't do. And if it's a child sexual offence, it doesn't matter what the verdict in the end is, their life is over.
Chris Daw, Kathleen Halliday, appreciate you talking about a sensitive subject. Thanks very much indeed for your time.